ce panel. Moi, c'est Daniel Onaondo. Je suis président de la Commission économique et monétaire d'Afrique centrale, une communauté qui réunit 6 États qui se composent du Cameroun, du Congo, de la RCA.
This is made up by Cameroon, Congo, also Guinea, Equatorial Guinea, and Congo. I'd like to remind you a very straightforward principle. Each panel member has 4 minutes for their presentation. Observers have 2 minutes for your comments. For those members of the panel, please respect the timing. To start up with, I would like to give the floor to Your Excellency Gloria Anarela Vélez Osejo, Secretary of State, Office of Culture, the Arts, and the Heritage of the Peoples of Honduras. Madam Secretary, you have the floor.
Muy buenas tardes a todas, a todos.
Good afternoon to all of you, both men and women. I'm the bearer of a great greeting on behalf of the government and the people of Honduras. In this worldwide meeting of culture, whose importance draws the attention of all human beings, we would like to extend our gratitude for the great job and special attentions that we have been receiving to the Democratic Government of Mexico, to the Director of UNESCO, Audrey Azoulay, to the Secretary of Culture of Mexico, Alejandra Fraustro Guerrero. Thank you for those who have made our worldwide meeting a reality. We have a deep hope that this global discussion be transparent. My country, since 10 years ago, defeated a 12-year-and-a-half dictatorship that destroyed the rule of law. It ruled out sovereignty, and it caused a very endless issue. Our people elected as a determinant majority Xiomara Castro Sarmiento as the president of our country. It's the first time in our history that a woman holds the position as a president, as she is the only woman governing in the Americas. She is taking over a refoundational project that gives a human face to a country that is there to defeat the degradation of the culture at unimaginable levels. I believe that any multicultural understanding is limited because each interpretation is hallmarked by the ideological understanding that each one has about the reality, about their experiences, knowledge, or social practices that are carried out in their own country. We are thinking in an intercultural discussion, dialogue, so that humankind can socialize. This is a vital mission. Empathy doesn't come out from an intention, but rather from experience. We need to learn how to socialize through different experiences. We are now in a cultural hybridization, which is interconnected as an output of globalization and new technologies, where identity take a different course to that of nationalism that was built in later independence of the 18th century. In the Central American region, specifically in the refoundation of the state of Honduras, under the government of Xiomara Castro Sarmiento, president of Honduras, we bet on renewing multi-situated and diverse culture, heterogeneous and with good wealth culture. And we lost this culture in the course of the more than 12 years that the brutal regime has lasted due to the coup d'etat of 2009. Our government is fully committed to the refoundation of a state that may guarantee the exercise of creative freedom, artistic education, cultural diversity, the rights of traditional people, the respect of rights and dignity of the artists, whether men and women, the rescue, protection, and enriching of cultural and intangible heritage of the country. Definitely, the complexity post-pandemic makes us rethink the new paradigms of modernity. It is thus a must to build cultural policies in order to value the promotion of cultures and arts, in order to foster and strengthen the peace and the good living. From the country of Francisco Morazán and José Falastiri, we would like to embed ourselves in the processes of construction without a country relative to the role of culture and creative arts worldwide. So thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre, pour les efforts faits dans votre pays pour la culture. Je voudrais tout de suite passer la parole à Madame la Ministre d'Annecy, Choukri, ministre du Tourisme, de l'Art et de la Culture de Malaisie. Madame la Ministre, vous avez la parole. 4 minutes.
Well, thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Excellencies, distinguished delegates. My name is Nancy Shukri. I'm the Minister of Tourism, Arts and Culture, Malaysia. It is indeed an honor to be part of the UNESCO World Conference on Cultural Policies and Sustainable Development, or Mondiacult 2022. The decision made at the 41st session of the UNESCO General Conference to hold the World Conference on Cultural Policies and Sustainable Development 40 years after the initial Mondiacult World Conference is indeed timely. I must thank the UNESCO for organizing the World Conference. I trust this conference will facilitate and set the tone towards a more robust and resilient cultural sector anchored in cultural policies, sustainable development prospects, safeguarding cultural heritage, and asserting the creative economy. Congratulations to the government of Mexico for hosting such an important event for our future cultural policies development and direction. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to begin with, Malaysia launched National Culture Policy, or NCP, 2021, emphasizing on cultural diversity to foster and preserve national identity, protecting cultural rights and equal participations in cultural activities by all Malaysians, regardless of age, gender, and ethnicity. Under the spirit of UNESCO, our policy is formed from shared values and norms, embraced and espoused as shared heritage long-rooted in this country. It becomes a source of reference to build a united and developed Malaysian society. As we are all aware, cultural and creative sectors are among the hardest hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. Strengthening government policies to support firms and workers during the pandemic, especially to the non-traditional business models and forms of employment in the sector, are the key to support the cultural sector to rebound. Embracing digitalization, cultural practitioners through non-governmental associations or organizations or NGOs are creating new avenues to carry out cultural programs. We have witnessed the growth of online art and cultural-related platforms as artists and cultural advocates embrace digital tools to stay engaged with arts and culture. Indeed, one unexpected impact of the pandemic has been the acceleration of digitization of cultural experiences. The heightened pace of acceptance of digital marketplaces among the traditional craftsmen have helped boost sales of their products which previously relied on tourists. However, aspects of misinformation, cyberspace vulnerabilities, and network integrity need to be looked at in equal measure. Any mismanagement in that aspect would fundamentally affect our experience in this digital culture. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, an integral part to assure sustainability of cultural activities and byproducts are through appropriate funding mechanism. Government and international organizations need to formulate necessary budget and funding by diversifying funding sources through government coffers, tax incentives, grants to accelerate cultural activities and participations. Investment and collaboration with the private sector, strategic partnership and startup ecosystem allows the expansion of cultural as an emerging economic value chain to assure sustainability of cultural activities and byproducts. Thus, public-private partnership models need to be pursued to help in the protection, preservation, and promotion of cultural practices as well as heritage assets. Lastly, Malaysia welcomes and supports the Mondiacult Declaration. I wish a fruitful UNESCO World Conference on Cultural Policies and Sustainable Development, Mondiacult 2022. Thank you. Muchas gracias.
Madame la ministre, on vous remercie infiniment, surtout le rôle que vous donnez à la numérisation pour avoir une durabilité culturelle. Donc, je voudrais maintenant passer
To
la parole
guarantee
à son Excellence,
sustainability
Monsieur
in cultural issues, I will give the floor
qui est
to
ministre national de
Mr.
l'Héritage de l'Art
Owen
et du
Bonissi,
gouvernement
Ministry of the
local
National
de
Heritage,
Malte.
the Arts, and the
Monsieur le
local
ministre, vous avez la
government
parole.
of Malta. Mr. Secretary, you have the floor.
Ministers of Culture, Member States and Associate Members of UNESCO, distinguished colleagues and guests. It is with
Distinguidos
great
invitados,
pleasure that I'm here
es un
with you
placer el
today,
estar aquí con ustedes
especially
el día
after
de
spending the past few years holding such interventions from behind the screen, talking to teleprompters and boxes. This is definitely a very welcome change. I would like to thank the Mexican government for the fantastic hospitality and for teaching us that cultural issues can be discussed with more clarity after a generous helping of traditional tequilas and margaritas. Dear friends, Malta is a proud member of the European Union and a proud member of the Mediterranean family. We are part and parcel of the cultural interests of the Mediterranean region and represent its colors. Malta's size and strategic location in the center of the Mediterranean basin have been a consistent advantage to the region several times. It is certainly not for nothing that we were called the nurse of the Mediterranean by world leaders in the most testing times of history. Malta's culture and creative characteristics have developed throughout the centuries and form an intrinsic part of our society, such as our language, art, and history. The Maltese language, for instance, is the only official Semitic language of the European Union. I tell my daughter in Hobbok when she wakes up in the morning, merhaba to my friends when we meet, and saha when we're toasting during lunch or dinner. My friends, the cultural and creative sectors are resilient yet fragile. We have a duty to address the needs of the sector in dialogue with relevant stakeholders, to embrace the importance of cultural rights and recognize the status of artists. It is only by listening to those who operate in the sector can we become agents for positive change. We have to listen and we have to act. In Malta, our contribution in the culture and creative sectors is going at a steady pace. During the pandemic, we implemented special measures. Once this was behind us, we provided the necessary stimulus to reboot the arts and cultural cycle. More funding mechanisms were introduced, community-led opportunities were held, cross-sectorial collaborations were nurtured, and international cultural relations were strengthened. We also issued our second national cultural policy. This is inspired by the right to culture and embraces culture and the arts as a path that leads to the well-being of all, aims to develop more meaningful links between culture and the creative industries and cultural diversity. My friends, Malta has always been very conscious of the roots of our personality as an island nation so geographically near to both Europe and North Africa. Through its artists, whose original content is a testament to the placement in the Mediterranean basin, Malta can not only provide a solid contribution to the cultural ecology of Europe, but also create viable cultural links across the Mediterranean region, which is culturally so rich and diverse. So in the tips of paintbrushes, in the ink of poetry, in the gracious movement of dancers, in the plucking in music, in the plucking of strings, may lie the key for the building of a better future. Thank you so much.
Monsieur le ministre, c'est nous qui vous remercions. Nous avons noté avec satisfaction qu'à Malte, vous avez surtout opté pour les mesures incitatives. Et vous avez, compte tenu de la pandémie, pour la pandémie de la pandémie de la COVID-19, vous avez mis en place des politiques culturelles, droit à la culture, pour le bien de tous. Je vous remercie infiniment, Monsieur le ministre. Nous allons maintenant passer la parole à son Excellence, Madame Annette Tottenberg-Rusted, ministre de la Culture et de l'Égalité de Norvège. Madame la ministre, vous avez la parole.
Está hablando en francés.
Colleagues from all over the world, thank you, UNESCO and the government of Mexico for bringing us together. The world is facing challenging times. This highlights the great importance of the normative work of UNESCO. Coming together is as important as ever. The 2030 Agenda acknowledges culture as a crucial contributor to many of the Sustainable Development Goals. Dear colleagues, I'm a firm believer in UNESCO's mandate and its work within the fields of culture. Norway is a candidate for UNESCO's executive board for 2025 to 2029. We are committed to safeguarding culture and heritage worldwide, both natural and cultural, tangible and intangible. We strongly believe in the importance of cultural policies, cultural infrastructure, and independent cultural institutions. It's a core principle for us that the role of the government is to facilitate culture and heritage. It must remain independent. Norway is a strong defender of freedom of expression. There cannot be any democracy without it. Recently, a government-appointed commission reviewed the conditions of freedom of expression, including artistic freedom, in Norway today. Even though the technological shift has democratized the possibilities for free speech worldwide, it also has brought on new challenges. Truth and facts are under attack. Hate speech, disinformation, propaganda spreads rapidly and widely on social media platforms. This poses a serious threat to sustaining democratic and peaceful societies. Vulnerable minorities are especially subjected to harassment when expressing themselves in public. Toxic discourse contributes to increased polarization and undermines trust in democracy. Big tech companies and platforms challenge the independency of our media and our editors as well. We don't believe these problem calls for prohibitions or sanctions, but we must stand together and support free editorial media. We must strengthen resilience in our populations by increasing digital competence and media literacy. And we must take an active part in the international push to regulate the big tech companies. I believe we should challenge the global digital platforms also when it comes to safeguarding and promoting linguistic diversity, especially for small languages. Diversity of content is important for the whole cultural ecosystem, for the diversity of cultural expressions, and for artists and cultural workers' income. An important part of facilitating cultural diversity is to include the culture and heritage of indigenous people and national minorities. In Norway, including the perspectives of the Sami population and other minorities is an important aspect of our cultural policy. I'm glad that the final declaration on Mondiacult addresses the importance of diverse cultural expressions worldwide. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary, for your report on cultural policies in your country. I would like to finish with Mrs. Asta Vreco, Minister of Culture from Slovenia.
Thank you.
Madam
Dear
Secretary, you have the floor.
distinguished guests, organizers, and colleagues, we are living in a times of permanent crisis, where more and more of world population is feeling the brutal effects of climate change, wars, numerous health crises, and above all, inequalities rising from unequal distribution of wealth. As leaders in the field of culture, we are entrusted with an enormous task: how to make sure culture remains the force of good in the world, an anchor of social cohesion and multilateralism, a source of well-being, bringing people closer together in more inclusive and equal manner. Culture should never be instrumentalized for any purposes, no matter how noble they might seem at first glance, and especially not to deepen division in society based on citizenship, gender, wealth, age, and other factors that are influencing social status and in both our artists and our audiences. We should never forget that culture is a value per se, and that artists are not obligated to serve any other purposes than their own artistic freedoms and visions. I therefore strongly believe that through contemporary participatory cultural policies, these guidelines should be pillars for building inclusive societies determined by social justice. In Slovenia, we are building a new model of culture that is putting a bottom-up approach based on participatory and inclusive dialogue with key stakeholders within and outside of cultural sector in the center of our public policies. This means that we are bringing together both institutions and creators, governmental offices, and civil society organizations. We are developing culture as a hub in which a long-term cultural policies can be produced and negotiated based on the concrete inputs from the sector itself. We deeply believe that if we want culture to truly represent the diverse societies in which we are living, we must also set up adequate methodologies and concrete measures that contribute to safer and more inclusive working environments across the field. Based on through the research, public policies must not only answer the needs of today, but also set up a framework for the laboratory and sustainable tomorrow. We therefore wish to build a culture into an interconnected field of intersections between stakeholders in live arts, heritage and environment, science, education, gender and other relevant fields. All of that has a clear aim: to put culture back in the center of a society for a better future for all. Thank you.
Je remercie Madame la Ministre pour leur approche holistique au niveau de la politique culturelle dans le pays.
For this holistic approach.
Ok, merci beaucoup. On avait un intervenant qui devait être là. Malheureusement, un observateur nous annonce que l'observateur n'est pas là. Donc, je remercie infiniment les différents membres du gouvernement pour leur approche à la politique culturelle durable. Maintenant, s'il vous plaît, quelqu'un d'autre veut prendre la parole dans la salle, je pourrais lui donner.
Cultural policies. And now I'm going to open the floor if someone wants to take the floor. Anyone from the audience?
Madame, vous avez la parole.
Yes, go ahead.
Venez par ici, s'il vous plaît.
You can go here. Yes, please.
Si vous pouvez vous présenter, s'il vous plaît. Okay.
Can you please introduce yourself? Thank you.
I'm short. So, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Wafa Belgesem. I'm from Tunisia, and I represent an observer here. It's called Culture Funding Watch. I just want to build on what Your Excellency had mentioned very thoroughly towards financing cultural policies. I think the common practice today is to think cultural policies and forgetting the strategies to finance those cultural policies. But as much as what you mentioned is important, diversifying the mechanism, I'd like to see cultural policy thinking of financing the sector, not only through the diversification of mechanism, but working on what I call making the ecosystem financially less hostile for cultural creative industries. And financing cultural creative industries should not be also the role of the state. I think the most sustainable way is to make sure that there are different players and supporters of the art who are local, whether they are local investor, philanthropist, private sector, government, local foundation. And I think that's the only way to make cultural policy possibly applicable, making sure also in the ecosystem there are specialists. I mean, I think the common mistake today is thinking that this is a policy, these are strategies, and then you have budget to spend. I think we need within the ecosystems experts bringing this knowledge within the cultural creative industries as an expertise. It exists in every single other sector, not in ours. We don't see too much of experts in resource mobilization for the art. And that's where comes a lot of problems related to inadequacy of the choice mechanisms and dependency on the grant as the only way to support the art. Thank you.
Madame, on vous remercie pour votre apport au niveau de financement.
Thank you very much, Madam, for your participation and speak about the funding on cultural policies. Madam Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you for the observation. Well, actually, we have just launched our National Culture Policy, I call it NCP 2021. It was very recent because we want to build in the inclusivity of cultural activities. And of course, the members of the board are the experts and also the NGOs, the members from the NGO. And our intention is not only to get them to be involved in cultural activities, we want more of those in the cultural activities to be able to monetize their activities. So this is what we are planning to do, and we have just launched it, and we hope that this is going to be successful for us in Malaysia, because after 51 years, this is the first time we just launched this new policy, and we hope that that will be very successful, as especially on monetary, on monetizing it, and that's what we want to see the return of investment of our cultural activities for those who are involved. Thank you. Yeah.
Je vous remercie, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you, Madam
Compte tenu
Minister.
du fait que personne ne veut intervenir, donc nous allons, avec votre permission,
Since no one
remercier encore une
has
fois de
raised
plus
their hand,
les membres du gouvernement
with your
pour
permission,
leur
I'm going
participation
to
active
thank the members
à
of the
leur nouvelle
government for
politique
your active
culturelle.
participation
Depuis hier,
in this
nous avons vu
session
que
about
la crise a
new
eu un
cultural
impact
policies.
défavorable
Since
sur les cultures de
yesterday,
nos pays. Face à cet
we saw the impact
impact, quelles sont les politiques que nous devons adopter?
that they
Je crois
have
que les uns et les autres, nous avons vu qu'il faut une
in
politique
culture, and that's
holistique
why
qui tienne compte
we
de
have
l'ensemble des
to be
secteurs. Il
inspired
faudrait des financements
by a holistic
innovants.
policy that takes
En un
into
mot,
account all
il faudrait une
sectors,
résilience
including
de la
investment.
culture vis-à-vis
In one word,
du choc.
we need
Le nouveau
a
concept qui
resilient
est
culture.
le développement durable, qui veut que ce soit un développement
This new
économique,
concept
politique et
of
social,
sustainable development,
environnemental, s'adresse
it
aussi à
has
la
to be
culture.
a political,
Et nous avons été heureux
social, and
de
environmental
constater que
development. It
l'UNESCO
should include
a
culture.
fait un pas vers l'avant.
With this, we have seen that
L'environnement
UNESCO
a des
has
conséquences
taken a step
énormes
ahead.
sur la culture de nos pays.
The
Donc, dans nos
environment
politiques culturelles,
has a
nous devons
huge impact
tenir compte
on
de
the
ça.
culture of our
Et donc,
country.
une fois de
So
plus,
our cultural
remercie les
policies
différentes
should
personnes
take into account
qui ont
this.
intervenu
Once again,
dans le
I
temps qui leur
thank
était
the panelists of
remercier
this
pour leur
session
contribution à l'émergence
for
de la culture
keeping up with the
dans les
time.
politiques
Thank you
de
very much
développement
for your
de nos pays.
participation,
Je vous remercie infiniment.
for the emerging culture in our countries. Thank you very much.